a bomb descended from the sky. If it were to explode upon hitting the ground, everything within a radius of dozens of miles would be razed to the ground. But at that very moment, a masked woman pressed a stopwatch, and the bomb and raindrops instantly froze in midair. The woman then turned the stopwatch, and everything around her began to reverse. The light in the sky rapidly changed, turning from night to day in just a few seconds. Jack was utterly amazed by this sight. This was the legendary time loop he had heard about. It was finally time to say goodbye. To ensure Jack's safety, Ms. Pei asked Wind Girl to escort Jack to the time corridor. However, when the two arrived at the cave, they unexpectedly discovered an injured time bird. Wind Girl guessed that it must have been attacked by the monsters, so she sent the time bird back to the castle while Jack returned to the inn alone. Back at the inn, Jack opened the letter his grandfather had written. The gist of it was that his grandfather had discovered Director's subordinates had infiltrated the children's home in England. The next day, Jack returned to the castle to find Ms. Pei, wanting to ask about Director's true identity. However, Ms. Pei refused to answer. Jack had no choice but to ask Wind Girl about the situation. Wind Girl took Jack underwater, manipulating the air to provide him with an oxygen mask. They arrived at a sunken ship on the seabed, and Wind Girl used her superpower to drain the water from the cabin. She then handed Jack a box that his grandfather had entrusted to her when he was a child, asking her to give it to Jack when the time was right. The box contained photos of those monsters and a map with the locations of the time loops marked. But Jack didn't understand why his grandfather had given these things to him. To clear Jack's doubts, Wind Girl took him to the seaside. Jack saw Ms. Pei holding a crossbow, seemingly waiting for something. Soon, a ragged giant monster suddenly appeared on the cliff. Jack was startled and told Ms. Pei to leave immediately. But Ms. Pei wasn't afraid at all. She pulled the trigger, and with one arrow, she killed the monster. Wind Girl told Jack that the monsters were invisible, but he had inherited his grandfather's superpower and was currently the only one who could see them. The reason Ms. Pei could kill the monsters was that her control over time was extremely precise, and with the markings Jack's grandfather had made on the ground, she could strike them down. Jack returned to the castle and told Ms. Pei about his grandfather's cause of death. Ms. Pei no longer concealed anything and told Jack everything. But just then, the time bird that Wind Girl had rescued from the cave earlier woke up. The time bird told Ms. Pei that Director hadn't given up on immortality and planned to capture more time birds to complete his experiment this time. Ms. Pei believed the castle was no longer safe, so she told the children to pack their bags and leave on the first ferry. Wind Girl wanted Jack to go with them, but Jack couldn't leave his parents behind, so he returned to the cave and came back to 2016. But as soon as he arrived, he discovered an old man's corpse on the beach rocks, also missing his eyes. It seemed the monsters had already invaded this small island. Jack decided to tell Ms. Pei about this, but just as he walked into the cave, he suddenly realized someone had followed him. It was the eyewitness from the island. No, it was Jack's therapist. No, it was Director. Using his shape-shifting superpower, Director had followed Jack all the way to the small island. Director revealed his true form and held a knife to Jack's throat, forcing Ms. Pei to be his test subject. Left with no choice, Ms. Pei turned into a time bird and flew into the cage. But with Ms. Pei gone, the giant monster that had previously appeared by the sea was about to attack the children's home, so Jack instructed everyone to grab their weapons, deciding to confront the monster their own way.